Rick wasn't entirely sure how he got himself into this mess. One moment, he was lounging in his modest spacecraft, nursing a drink that tasted like burnt rubber, and the next, he was summoned to the estate of Zarkin the Baron. The message was cryptic, something about a diplomatic gesture and an offer he couldn't refuse. It wasn't the first time an alien leader had tried to one-up humanity with their twisted sense of humor, but this took the cake. As Rick entered the Baron's grand hall, he was greeted by the usual pomp and overdone alien theatrics. Zarkin's species, the Valnari, had a flair for the dramatic. Their robes looked like they were stolen from a discount Renaissance fair, and their gestures were so exaggerated it felt like Rick had accidentally stumbled into an alien opera. "Ah, the human arrives!" Zarkin boomed, his bulbous head wobbling like a gelatin mold. "We, the superior Valnari, have decided to bestow upon you a gift. A token of goodwill." Rick adjusted his jacket and smirked. "You shouldn't have, Zarkin." "Really?" Zarkin grinned, a toothy, unsettling display that looked more predatory than generous. "Oh, but we insist. Bring forth my daughter!" The crowd parted dramatically, and a platform rolled forward. On it sat a strikingly beautiful Valnari woman, in what appeared to be a high-tech wheelchair. Her golden skin shimmered under the alien lights, and her eyes burned with intelligence and something else, resentment. Rick blinked. Wow. Okay. She's lovely? She's paralyzed, Zarkin declared, his voice dripping with mockery. A useless burden by our standards. But for a primitive species like yours, she might make a fine companion. The room erupted in laughter, though Rick noticed Leilani's jaw tighten. She wasn't laughing. Neither was Rick. "Let me get this straight," Rick said, his voice cutting through the noise. "You're giving me your daughter because, what? You think I'll be too stupid to know it's an insult?" Zarkin's grin widened. "Precisely. Consider it a diplomatic gesture." Rick leaned against the nearest alien pillar, his smirk returning. "Well, Zarkin, I've got to hand it to you. You've really outdone yourself in the galactic jerk department. But you know what? I accept." The laughter died. Zarkin's grin faltered. Leilani raised an eyebrow, her lips twitching as if suppressing a smile. "You accept?" Zarkin asked, clearly expecting outrage. "Absolutely," Rick replied, his tone oozing with fake enthusiasm. "I mean, she's clearly the most valuable thing in this room. Look at her, brains, beauty, and a personality I'm sure you haven't managed to crush entirely. Yeah, I'll take her off your hands." "Thanks, buddy." Leilani's lips parted, a quiet gasp escaping her, though she quickly masked it with a bored expression. The crowd murmured in confusion. This wasn't how the joke was supposed to go. Zarkin sputtered, his face turning an alarming shade of purple. "You insolent human! You think you're clever." "Think?" Rick cut in, flashing a grin. "Oh, Zarkin, I know I'm clever. And don't worry, I'll make sure your daughter gets treated like the royalty she is." "Right, sweetheart?" Leilani tilted her head, studying Rick with a mix of surprise and amusement. "I suppose that's better than staying here," she said, her voice sharp and laced with sarcasm. Rick gave her a mock bow. "Your chariot awaits, my lady." As he wheeled her out of the hall, the silence behind them was deafening. It wasn't until they were outside that Leilani broke it with a low, sardonic chuckle. "You really know how to make an exit," she said, her golden eyes glinting with mischief. "Comes with the job," Rick replied. "Now let's get one thing straight. I'm not your babysitter, and you're not my problem. But if we're stuck together, we're going to make this work. Deal?" Leilani smirked. "Deal. But fair warning, I don't play nice." "Neither do I." The two shared a look, an unspoken agreement passing between them. This wasn't the start either of them had expected, but it was clear they were in for one hell of a ride. Leilani's first words after they left the Baron's estate set the tone for everything to come. "So, what's your plan? Gonna parade me around as your charity project? Maybe win a medal for being such a noble human?" Rick snorted as he adjusted the controls on the hover cart he'd borrowed for the trip back to his ship. Nah, metals are too much upkeep. I was thinking more along the lines of survival. You seem sharp, figure you'll be better company than my last co-pilot. Oh, so I'm a replacement now? She shot back, her tone sharp but with a trace of curiosity. Unless you're planning to bail, Rick quipped. Though, considering the alternative is going back to Daddy Dearest, I'm guessing you're sticking around. Leilani's silence spoke volumes. It wasn't resignation, it was calculation. Back on Rick's ship, the banter continued. Leilani had a way of cutting through Rick's usual defenses with an acid wit that he found oddly refreshing. Nice setup, she said, glancing around the cramped quarters. I see you've gone for the space hobo aesthetic. Careful, Rick warned, smirking. Insults hurt more when they're accurate. Their first real breakthrough came when Rick stumbled upon a datapad she'd been quietly using in the corner. It was filled with notes, sharp observations, detailed plans, and biting critiques of her father's policies. You're into politics? Rick asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm into survival, she replied coolly. And maybe, just maybe, proving that the Baron's way isn't the only way. Rick leaned back in his chair, giving her a long look. You've got more going on than you let on. And you're less of an idiot than you look. She shot back, a sly smile tugging at her lips. The telepathy revelation came during one of their many sparring matches. Rick was in the middle of a story, something about a drunken brawl on a backwater moon, when Leilani suddenly burst out laughing. What's so funny? He asked, mildly offended. You, she replied, tapping her temple. Your thoughts are louder than your mouth. Rick froze. Wait, you're reading my mind? Not on purpose, she said, rolling her eyes. You're just very obvious. Like a bad transmission on repeat. The implications were both terrifying and hilarious. Suddenly, Rick found himself second-guessing every stray thought, which only made Leilani laugh harder. Oh, this is going to be fun, she said, her grin practically predatory. Despite the teasing, it didn't take long for Rick to see the potential in her abilities. Telepathy wasn't just rare, it was powerful. But Leilani wasn't interested in being a weapon. I'm not some tool for you to wield, she snapped when Rick suggested using her abilities during a trade negotiation. I didn't say that, he countered. But if we're going to survive out here, we need every edge we can get. Her glare softened slightly. Fine. But if you try to turn me into your personal lie detector, I'm out. Deal, Rick said, holding up his hands in surrender. Their partnership began to shift after that. The sarcastic barbs remained, but there was a growing sense of trust between them. Rick even started to open up about his past, a series of failed ventures and burned bridges that had left him drifting through the galaxy. Sounds like you're as much of a reject as I am, Leilani said one evening, her tone surprisingly gentle. Pretty much, Rick admitted. But hey, at least I've got good company now. Leilani rolled her eyes, but she couldn't hide the small smile that crept across her face. The romantic tension between them simmered beneath the surface, fueled by their constant back and forth. So tell me, Leilani asked one day, her voice dripping with mock innocence. Is this your usual strategy for wooing women? Insults and half-baked plans? Only when they're as high maintenance as you. Rick shot back, grinning. Their banter was laced with double meanings, each exchange a game of who could outwit the other. But beneath the humor, there was a growing connection, something neither of them wanted to acknowledge just yet. As they navigated the strange customs of the galaxy, their differences became a source of comedy and camaraderie. Rick's human perspective often clashed hilariously with Leilani's alien upbringing. When they visited a market on a neutral planet, Rick mistook a ceremonial headpiece for a fruit basket, much to Leilani's amusement. You humans really don't understand subtlety, do you? She teased. And you Valnari take everything way too seriously. He shot back, tossing the headpiece onto the counter. Despite the challenges, they began to find a rhythm. Rick taught Leilani the finer points of human humor, everything from sarcasm to slapstick, while she educated him on the intricacies of Valnari politics. You know, Rick said one evening, leaning back in his chair. For someone who claims to hate humans, you're not half bad. Don't get used to it, she replied, though her smile betrayed her words. By the time their next challenge appeared on the horizon, they were no longer just two people thrown together by circumstance. They were a team, an unlikely duo with a shared determination to prove the galaxy wrong. Their first big test came when Rick suggested they enter Leilani into a galaxy-wide holotalent competition. At first, she thought he was joking. You want me to do what? She asked, her tone dripping with disbelief. Show the galaxy what you've got, Rick replied, leaning casually against the console. Your telepathy, your wit, hell, even that sharp tongue of yours. It's a winning combination. Leilani snorted. This isn't some human feel-good story, Rick. The galaxy doesn't care about people like me. That's exactly why you should do it, he countered. Show them they're wrong. It took several days of convincing and a few hilariously terrible examples of Rick attempting stand-up comedy to get her on board. By the time she agreed, the competition was only a week away. They dove into preparations with an intensity either of them expected. Rick took his role as her manager a little too seriously, crafting ridiculous slogans like, Leilani, breaking minds and breaking barriers. Leilani, for her part, rolled her eyes at his antics but couldn't hide the flicker of amusement. When the day of the competition arrived, the venue was packed with beings from every corner of the galaxy. The stage was a holographic marvel, capable of transforming into anything the performer desired. Rick stood backstage, nervously adjusting his jacket, while Leilani sat calmly in her chair, her usual sarcasm replaced by quiet determination. As she rolled onto the stage, the crowd buzzed with curiosity. A Valnari woman in a wheelchair wasn't a common sight, and the whispers grew louder as she positioned herself in the center of the platform. Leilani began with a simple statement. I'm here to prove that even the galaxy's biggest skeptics can learn something new. Starting with my father. The audience erupted in laughter, and Rick, watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but grin. Her performance was a mix of biting humor and stunning displays of telepathy. She called out audience members, predicting their thoughts and playfully roasting them with pinpoint accuracy. When one particularly pompous alien tried to challenge her, she silenced him with a perfectly timed joke about his taste in fashion, earning thunderous applause. Rick's favorite moment came when she addressed the panel of judges directly. You think I'm here to prove myself to you? Please! I'm here because the galaxy deserves a good laugh at your expense. By the time her performance ended, the crowd was on its feet, cheering and chanting her name. Leilani's smile was subtle but genuine, a rare moment of vulnerability that Rick would never forget. Backstage, Rick greeted her with his trademark smirk. Told you you'd crush it. Don't get cocky, she replied, though her tone lacked its usual bite. Her victory wasn't just personal, it sent shockwaves through the galaxy. News outlets couldn't stop talking about the paralyzed Valnari woman who defied expectations. Rick, ever the opportunist, leaned into the hype, booking interviews and sponsorships faster than Leilani could protest. One particular interview stood out. The host, an overly enthusiastic alien with a penchant for invasive questions, asked Leilani what she thought of her father's reaction to her success. I imagine he's furious, she said, her tone dripping with mock innocence. After all, he always said I'd never amount to anything. Guess I proved him wrong. The clip went viral, sparking debates across the galaxy about disability rights and the outdated views of leaders like the Baron. Of course, Zarkin didn't take kindly to being the butt of the joke. He attempted to sabotage her growing fame by spreading rumors and pulling strings behind the scenes. But Leilani, with Rick's help, was always one step ahead. In one particularly satisfying moment, they exposed Zarkin's shady dealings during a live broadcast. Leilani used her telepathy to reveal damning evidence, leaving her father stammering and humiliated. The crowd's reaction was swift and brutal, turning against him with cheers for Leilani's bravery. As the dust settled, Rick and Leilani found themselves alone on the ship, reflecting on everything they'd accomplished. You know, Rick said, leaning back in his chair, I think this might be the start of something big. Leilani smirked. Don't let it go to your head, Earthling. But the glint in her eyes said everything he needed to know. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. And Rick, despite his many flaws, had helped her get there. The aftermath of Leilani's victory was nothing short of chaotic. Everywhere they went, someone recognized her. From bustling spaceports to obscure asteroid outposts, her name was on everyone's lips. Rick, ever the opportunist, basked in the glow of her fame, casually throwing out, "Yeah, I'm her manager," to anyone who asked. Leilani, however, was less enthused. "I didn't sign up to be the galaxy's poster child for inspiration," she grumbled one evening, sipping a strange alien brew that Rick assured her was probably not toxic. "And yet here you are," Rick replied with a grin. "Face it, you're a star. People love you. Even the ones who thought they wouldn't." Leilani rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Despite her reluctance, she couldn't deny the impact she was having. Messages flooded in from beings across the galaxy, stories of individuals inspired by her to embrace their own struggles and defy societal expectations. It wasn't long before an invitation arrived for Leilani to speak at the Galactic Summit. The event was a big deal, attended by leaders and dignitaries from every major faction. Rick, predictably, was ecstatic. "This is huge!" he exclaimed, pacing the ship's small common area. "You'll be on stage, in front of the most powerful people in the galaxy. Imagine the possibilities!" Leilani raised an eyebrow. "You mean the possibilities for me to embarrass myself in front of the galaxy's elite?" Rick smirked. "Or the possibilities for you to deliver the speech of a lifetime and stick it to every stuck-up leader who ever doubted you? Your choice." The summit was as grand as expected, with opulent decorations, an absurdly long red carpet, and enough security to make Rick feel like he was under a microscope. Leilani, however, handled it with her usual mix of sarcasm and poise. When it was her turn to speak, she rolled onto the stage with a calm confidence that silenced the murmuring crowd. Rick watched from the sidelines, equal parts nervous and proud. "My name is Leilani," she began, her voice steady but tinged with defiance. "And for most of my life, I've been told I was less than. Less capable. Less valuable. Less worthy. But today I stand, or sit rather, before you as proof that those assumptions are wrong." Her words were met with applause, but she wasn't finished. "The galaxy has a habit of underestimating people who don't fit its narrow definitions of strength or worth. I'm here to challenge that habit. To prove that value isn't determined by what you can or can't do physically, but by the impact you make." As she spoke, Rick noticed something extraordinary. The crowd, initially skeptical, was leaning in, captivated by her words. Even the most stoic leaders seemed moved, their expressions softening as Leilani shared her story. "And to those who still cling to outdated beliefs," she continued, her tone sharpening, "know this: change is coming. Not because I demand it, but because people across the galaxy are waking up to the truth that strength comes in many forms, and no one has the right to define it for someone else." The room erupted in a standing ovation. Rick, unable to contain himself, let out a loud cheer that earned him a few disapproving looks from nearby dignitaries. He didn't care. Leilani had done it. Backstage, she found him grinning like an idiot. "You were incredible," he said, his voice uncharacteristically earnest. "Don't make a big deal out of it," she replied, though her small smile betrayed her true feelings. As they left the summit, Leilani's speech began to ripple through the galaxy. Debates sparked, laws were questioned, and attitudes began to shift. For the first time, beings from all walks of life felt empowered to challenge the status quo. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. The Baron, nursing his wounded pride, attempted one last act of sabotage. He arranged for Leilani and Rick to be ambushed during a routine supply stop, hoping to intimidate them into silence. But Leilani, with her sharp mind and telepathic abilities, turned the tables. She outsmarted the would-be attackers, exposing their plans to the local authorities and ensuring the Baron's involvement was made public. "Did you really think I'd let him win?" she asked Rick afterward, her tone dripping with mock incredulity. "Not for a second," Rick replied, grinning. But watching you crush his plans was still pretty satisfying. With the Baron's reputation in tatters, Leilani's influence only grew. She continued to advocate for change, using her platform to challenge prejudices and inspire action. And Rick, ever by her side, found himself not just managing her career but becoming a better person in the process. Their partnership deepened, the line between friendship and something more growing blurrier with each passing day. Late one night, as they sat together in the cockpit, staring out at the endless expanse of stars, Rick finally broke the silence. "You know, I've had a lot of crazy adventures," he said, his tone unusually soft. "But this? Being with you? It's the best one yet." Leilani glanced at him, her golden eyes reflecting the starlight. "Careful, Earthling. You're starting to sound sentimental." "Maybe I am," he admitted. "But I figure if you can face down the entire galaxy, I can handle being a little sappy." For once, Leilani didn't have a witty retort. Instead, she smiled, a real, genuine smile, and leaned ever so slightly closer to him. As the ship drifted through the stars, their laughter echoed through the cockpit, a sound that promised more adventures, more challenges, and most importantly, more moments together. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were thriving, proving to the galaxy that even the unlikeliest pair could change the universe.